Easily, yeah. I think we both follow each other. So anyways, let's get started. How are we doing? I'm Jordan Schiller from UVMtv, and we are sitting in with Christine and Charles from the Burlington Tenants Union. How are you guys doing today?
Doing excellent. How are you doing?
Fantastic. How are you, Charles?
Doing all right. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, this is a little bit awkward because we only have one microphone, so let's just do like a Marco Polo thing. Raise your hand if you want to start off with one of these questions. So to start off, can you tell me a little bit about your organization and exactly what a tenants union is and does?
We got started with this about 7 months ago now. It is a tenants union is all the tenants in Burlington getting together to take back power from the landlords and get our rights back and more rights, and to hopefully down the line get some laws changed to make things better for people that do rent and try to make rents lower and force the landlord to make repairs and try to hopefully fight for some kind of legal assistance, because right now there is none.
And just to add to that, because you are a UVM student and this is about UVM, and in particular, one of the things that we do want to do is support UVM students, because on-campus housing costs are so expensive. Right now we're shooting in Trinity. If I remember correctly, a forced triple or quad up here is like $700 per person to share a bedroom with 3 other adults. Those are prices you see in San Francisco.
So let's talk more about Burlington. Many students this is the first time they're renting, and I didn't even occur to me that you guys talked about dorm prices too. What advice would you have to give to a UVM or St. Mike's or Champlain student who is renting a property downtown for the first time?
Watch who you're renting from. It's a very serious issue. There's quite a few single landlords, but all the bigger landlords like Bissonnettes and Handies and Bobes, they will use the daylights out of you and they will charge you up the wazoo, very expensive prices for very poorly managed or taken care of properties.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about is that Burlington, in a kind of unique way, has a civilian board called the Housing Board of Review, and it's a way for people to get their deposits back. So a lot of times when students are moving away, landlords will just take their entire deposit or will overcharge for things that they really shouldn't be charging for in the first place. And we have this Housing Board of Review, which is severely underutilized. Last year, only 33 cases went in front of the Housing Board of Review in a city which has 24,000 renters, 10,000 rental units, and I want to say 4,000 of those change over every year, if not more. And so one of the things that I think about so much is that students are really being taken advantage of by these landlords, and as long as students know about the Housing Board of Review and know that people can go on their behalf, even if you move away when you graduate, or if you're away for a semester, you can write a letter and have someone go on your behalf to get that money for you. And another thing is that oftentimes one tenant will go to the Housing Board of Review and they will win, but because the other 3 tenants never wrote saying that that person can go on their behalf, that landlord ends up keeping thousands of dollars that they essentially stole, that they should not have even had, but because of a legal technicality, they get to keep it. So the Housing Board of Review, I think, is a really, really big issue, and one that I hope that students will learn more about and that we hope to educate folks about more.
On that note, they don't just do damage deposits. If you are having an issue with your landlord because they're failing to make repairs and you have gone to code enforcement and they're still not doing their jobs, Housing Board of Review is also there for you to help you to force your landlord to make the necessary repairs to your building as well. It's not just for damage deposits.
And that's 1 second. And that's like something you could do before you have to go to small claims court or something like that.
Yeah, I would just say that my understanding is that Housing Board of Review, you cannot force landlords to fix items, but you can go there to publicly shame your landlord. I mean, it's honestly like one of the issues that we find in the city is that code enforcement in the city, they claim that they only have a little bit of authority to actually get landlords to fix their units. And so unfortunately, the only power we really have is coming together, organizing together, and then using different ways of organization, including public shaming. And one way is to bring your landlord to the Housing Board of Review. They have to write something up about it. It's non-binding, but it's one way to say, hey, my landlord so-and-so has been doing a terrible job, refuses to fix things, and now I have it in writing.
It's a really important thing to know about just at least some venue of resort that tenants have. So let's start talking about rent. As it exists right now, what I found online, Burlington average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is about $1,400 a month. Does that sound right?
All depending on, again, exactly who it is that you're renting from, because like Bissonnettes, they will shove a 2-bedroom up to $1,650. A lot of the landlords in the city now are getting very creative around how to not be renting to low-income people. They know the caps for all these housing authorities, and as far as what they will pay for rent, and they're putting their limits $5 and $10 over that limit just so that they don't have to rent to low-income people because they know they can't afford to take the apartment.
Another thing that landlords have been doing, which we've seen in other cities too, Burlington is not unique, particularly Eric Farrell on the Burlington College land, Eagles Landing or whatever it's called, and Redstone too, is what they'll do is they'll advertise their rental prices for, say, $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, but then give you a month of rent free. And so there's lots of ways where landlords are inflating their sale price in ways that, as consumers, it feels like fraud, whether legally or not, I don't know. And then there's one other thing that I was thinking of, which was, the other thing is that a lot of landlords will pass on their heating bills and heating costs to tenants. And so oftentimes, yes, it might be $1,400 a month as an average, but a lot of those lower costing 2-bedroom apartments end up costing more because during the winter they're paying $400 or $500 per month just in heating bills because the landlord is too cheap to fix anything and the city is not enforcing those codes.
So currently, there exists no city in America where minimum wage is enough to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. And I know that personally, I've been renting the same property for about 3 years, and my rent's been creeping up. It's heading north. Bernie Sanders has proposed rent control nationally. What is rent control, and what effect do you think it would have on Burlington renters?
So rent control is an idea, or rent protection. It's an idea that landlords should only be allowed to get a fair value for the building they own. And so in cities where rent control has been in place, like Berkeley, California, landlords are still making money. They're just only making, say, 3 or 4% a year, as opposed to in Burlington, where they can be making 10, 20, 30, 40%. And so rent control is really just forcing a housing market, which doesn't work at all for the majority of workers. It forces it to act as if it works. So that landlords can't just jack up rates whenever they want. They can't evict people and then jack up rates, which is like vacancy control. And so, one of the things about Burlington and Bernie is that Bernie in the 80s, he tried to push for rent control in Burlington, and it failed because of the state legislature, which refused to pass it. What we're seeing now in Burlington is Mayor Weinberger has publicly said that he really wants to work with us, but would never support rent control, which is unfortunate because he's really ignoring a lot of the data and science behind how rent control keeps low-income folks in their homes and seniors, and that rent control doesn't affect new development. Anywhere that rent control happens, new development is not included in the rent control for at least 10, 15, 20 years. And so for people who say that rent control doesn't work, it's honestly a very capitalist answer. It's more of a social democratic, but it's still a capitalist answer to our housing market.
So to talk more about eviction, it's kind of no mystery that Burlington has some degree of a homeless problem. What are eviction rates like, and what are some recourses for people who are either have been evicted or are facing eviction?
Right now, there's more and more people that are low income being shoved out onto the streets because of these rising rent prices. And the fact that a landlord can evict you anytime during the year, doesn't matter if you have children, doesn't matter if you're elderly, doesn't matter if you're a sick elderly person, they can shove you out onto the streets. Regardless, they can do it by a no-cause eviction, where it means that you've done nothing wrong. They just want you to leave. Or they can do a for-cause eviction. For-cause means you've done something against whatever they've written in your lease. More and more we're finding no-cause evictions because landlords have now figured out, oh, we can charge all this money for our crappy apartments, and these people can't pay it, so they're going to be forced to leave so that they can slap lipstick and mascara onto the property and charge that much more for the rent. So evictions are on the rise, poorly.
And I would say that most of the evictions are not happening through courts. For example, Bissonnette in the Old North End, he evicted 300 plus low-income households, and he did that by upgrading the units. And so, right, and it's crazy to think about that. You know, our city council and our mayor sat by and let that happen. So the problem is, one of the bigger issues, I think, is that most evictions are happening behind closed doors. They're happening in a coercive manner. They're happening in ways where, for example, maybe a tenant broke some small fraction. You know, the contracts are convoluted. They're hard to understand. And in Vermont, if you break it even the smallest infraction, that can be a reason to evict. You know, not because you've, purposefully caused damage or aren't paying your rent. It could be because you let someone have a dog over and your lease says no dogs allowed and your landlord found out. And so one of the things that as a tenant union we really want to do is bring power back to renters, because right now the landlords have all of the power. They're able to kick us out of our community even if we've been here for 10, 20, 30 years. And yeah, it's just not fair.
That was really sobering. 300 households. It's incredible to think that people are being priced out of homes in progressive Burlington, allegedly progressive. And to that end, on your website, you talk about fighting for a post-market approach to housing. How do you see, one, that being achieved, and what do you think a post-landlord world would look like?
One of the things that I think about when it comes to the idea is decommodifying housing is often the more wonky-ish term. Yeah. The idea is that housing is a necessity. It's a basic necessity, and it should be a right. And so why would we want people to use it as an investment vehicle? Why would we say that someone making extra money is a more important community value than everyone having a home? And unfortunately, in America, under capitalism, that is how things currently work. There's no reason it has to be that way. In other countries, there's something called social housing. In Vienna, Austria, about 20% of their housing is social housing. It is owned by the municipality, and it is controlled by the tenants. So if tenants want to make changes, they are allowed to. It's mixed income, and anyone is allowed who, there's no income requirements. A lot of the nonprofit housing that we have in Burlington is segregated. It's either seniors can be in this one building, or people who are making, low income or less than, the typical income can live in this building. And the way social housing works is that it's really about everyone's neighbors. Another city is Berlin in Germany. They are recently working on a $5 billion buyback. So after the fall of the Soviet Union, they let a lot of their state-owned housing be privatized. And what's happening now, and these companies own more housing than the entire city of Burlington. Like, they own hundreds of thousands of units. Like, it's crazy. But what they've noticed is rent prices are increasing incredibly, and it's these corporate landlords that have zero interest in the community and couldn't care less about who's living there as long as they get paid. They don't care if people are getting evicted as long as they're getting paid and making a profit. And so there are other ways, there are other models of housing that can exist. One example is, healthcare. We're really talking about nationally about Medicare for all and about how everyone should have healthcare. And we think it should be the same with housing.
And when you talk about social housing or public housing or developments like that, that aren't means tested or segregated, a lot of people bring up NIMBYs and YIMBYs. I've only ever seen that term in like a few headlines, and I haven't really put in the work to figure out what the heck that means. So what's a NIMBY, what's a YIMBY, and what do they believe, and what does that have to do with housing?
So a NIMBY is not in my backyard. What Burlington is doing now is allowing homeowners that have significant sized properties, that have like big backyards, say they're on like an acre of land behind their house. They're allowing them to build sub-housing back in their backyards. And some homeowners do not agree with this. So it's the acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. So the YIMBY, the Y end of it, is yes in my backyard. We're trying to get these homeowners that have that kind of land to build more rental units at the back of their properties, to kind of coexist with the renters in Burlington as well as living on the property themselves.
And my understanding of NIMBY and YIMBY is I honestly don't see much of a difference. I think NIMBYs are often folks who don't want their zoning changed so that they can live in single-family homes. YIMBYs want zoning changed, but not in their own neighborhoods. They often want it downtown. They often want it in the old North End. That they're all for density, but a lot of these folks are either living in expensive condos or living in the new North End or the South End, which is much less dense. And so one of the things is that the mayor is trying to do these ADUs, these accessory dwelling units. And one of the reasons he's doing that is so that he doesn't have to try to fight to change zoning. And so his hope is that, well, if a couple of households decide to build a small house in their backyard, that's going to increase the density in any meaningful way. But it's not. It really isn't going to. And so what we, I think, believe in is something called YIMBY, which is social housing in my backyard, which is, going back to that idea, which is, we're more than happy to have neighbors, but those neighbors shouldn't be all, high-end renters. They shouldn't all be high-end condo owners. It needs to be a healthy mix of folks who maybe were previously homeless, folks who are low income, folks who are moderate income, folks who are high income. And unfortunately in Burlington right now, our housing is very economically segregated. And for me, when I see YIMBY or NIMBY, all I see is that remake of that economic segregation. Just the NIMBYs are anti almost all development, and YIMBYs are for development, but only for really development that serves a higher income level.
What are some methods that you have used to organize renters, and how can people get involved if they've been liking what they've been hearing so far?
Well, we have a Facebook page. We have a website. We are on Twitter. We have just about every single one of the social media sites out there.
They're posters.
Yes, we have posters that we are now making up. We are also going to be having a housing summit for renters. Not anything like the mayor's housing summit. That was a joke. He made no reference to renters whatsoever. And when we approached him about this at the back of the room and we started giving our input, it completely shut him down. He had no clue what to say next. He just kept looking at the floor and looking at the room. He was completely lost. So we're doing this, and hopefully we can drum up some more support, because union ain't a union without you. We got to have more people. We would love to see more people coming to our regular meetings. And we are going to have childcare and food at the library for this, so that anybody with little children of any age, they can come. There will be professional daycare people there. that know how to deal with children, and the parents can sit in one room and the kids can sit in another.
And I think some of the things we've done recently, we've done some educational pickets. And so we're having an educational picket on October 31st, right outside Handy Court. Rick Handy owns that entire building. He is a slumlord. I know someone who rented from him a couple years ago, and he barged into their house and threatened to break their fingers if they touched the thermostat. Yep. And so so we've been doing some informational pickets. I think the summit that Christy was talking about, which is going to be November 3rd at the library, is going to be really important. It's from 12:30 to 4:30. And really what we're hoping is that we're really hoping to organize more people. In the past 7 months, there's probably about 10, 15 of us who've been really working together, but we really want to expand it. We would love to see a student-run tenants organization on campus. We would love to help that. We would love to help get that started, whether that's on UVM or Champlain or St. Mike's, because UVM, the housing costs that the campus that the colleges are charging are affecting our off-campus housing costs. If you're paying $700 to share a bedroom with 2 other people, paying $900 to get your own bedroom where you're able to, partake in drinking or whatever else you want to do without being bothered. I mean, that's a good deal. You're going to see that and say, this is actually reasonable, because that's your first involvement in the housing market is UVM or Champlain College, where you're paying an arm and a leg, often through loans, to cover. And so November 3rd is going to be our housing summit, and I think our hope is really just to get people talking. If there's enough people there who are really interested in pushing for rent control, it's going to be a big fight. We would have to take it statewide, but that is something we're really interested in. If it's about really organizing students, we would love to help with that. If it's about organizing a Burlington Housing Authority, some of the public housing around here, or a Champlain Housing Trust, or BOVES or BIS and NET, whatever it might be, that's something that we really want to start working towards after November 3rd is organizing more tenants. And so you can get more information. Our website is burlingtontenantsunion.com /summit for the summit. Our Twitter is at Tenant Union BTV. Facebook is Burlington Tenants Union, and we have an Instagram, which is I want to say it's Renters of BTV is the name of it, and we've been sharing stories that folks have sent us with photos or just stories about some of the terrible housing situations that they've been in the Burlington area.
They can also contact us to get suggestions and information on how to deal with different things with their landlords, like legal letters and how to write one, and protections, knowledge of protections. After the summit, we're going to be having a workshop of sorts for to let everybody know what their rights are, because we find that a lot of tenants, college students, more so than most people, don't know that they have rights and what those few rights are. So we are really about giving everybody their rights so that they know how to fight back against these landlords.
All right, we'll have all of those links posted either on this video or in the description of this. Burlington Tenants Union, Christine, Charles, thank you so much for coming on and educating us. And before we go, could you maybe do like a very quick firing off list of tenants' rights?
You have the right to a habitable apartment. You have the right to having heat during the winter. You have a right to hot water. Christy, catch me if I'm wrong on any of these. You have a right to get your deposit back, particularly if it's just wear and tear. You have a right to get your problems fixed within 30 days, which is still too long. You have a right to complain to code enforcement, and you're not legally allowed to be retaliated against for 90 days. That's a whole other issue, but you get some time. You have a right. Anything else, Christy, that you can think of?
You have the right to peaceably enjoy your apartment. That means if another tenant in the building is doing something that you deem to be disrespectful, you can call up the landlord and say, look, this other tenant is being very disrespectful. Tell them what they're doing. and expect the landlord to respond to that and say to this other tenant, you need to stop what you're doing because you're disrespecting the other tenants in the building. And that seems to be more and more what we're finding with some tenants is they're being disrespected by other tenants in the building and the landlords aren't doing anything. Now, the police aren't going to help you. Unfortunately, this is a fact. They will tell you that it is a civil issue and they will go nowhere near it. So if someone is smoking in their apartment and it's filling yours, you have the right to tell the landlord, look, I can't handle this. And it's their responsibility to stop it from happening.
And I would just say if that is something that's happening, we would love to help you find ways to tell that, tenant, even without getting the landlord involved if possible. Because, at the end of the day, we don't want anyone to be evicted. And at the same time, they're trying to find that balance. But definitely, there is that right to habitability, the right to enjoy your apartment, the right to electricity and just basic necessity, water. And unfortunately, it's not always not there. One other thing is you have the right that a landlord is supposed to take care of trash and what's the other one? And water. And we've talked to some students whose landlords don't do that. So one thing to keep in mind is that a landlord has to take care of your trash and water for you. It is not your job to worry about that.
And we know for a fact that Bissonet's is charging for trash. It's been written in some people's leases. So you really got to watch out with these leases. If you think there's anything questionable in a lease that you may be signing for the first time, definitely take it to legal aid, even though they don't really provide all that much, or come to us at the Tenants Union, and we will go over your lease with you and make sure that there is nothing illegal in that lease, because once you do sign it, it is legally binding, and then you have more problems.
Thank you so much again for this interview, and thank you even more for all the work that you do for the Burlington community. It's been great talking to you, and keep up the good fight. I ain't got no home, I'm just a